HiyaHiya knitters. This week I have made the Simple Seamless Satchel by Rachel Mckinney. I will put the link to the pattern on Ravelry below for you to try. It is an amazing pattern and I am making another one at the moment. Because this video is really for new knitters, it's to show that you can have the best tools, the best pattern, but you're still going to make mistakes. But those mistakes aren't bad. Keep going, learn from them, make more mistakes, because it's the only way you're going to improve your knitting. As I said, I am currently knitting up a correct version of this bag, but for the sake of this video, I'm going to be making a few mistakes to show the difference that it makes. So, to make this, I used some of my cheapy yarn stash. This one is a favourite go-to of mine, as it's really colourful and knits into a tie-dye style pattern. I've had it for a while and it is a go-to for little projects. Now the first hiccup in this project would be the needle size. The pattern calls for a US size 8 and size 15 circular needles, which would be 5mm or 10mm. However, I didn't have any 10 or 15mm needles to hand, and that is what inspired this video. So I knitted this bag using a 4mm and a 5mm needle instead. This drastically changed the size of the pattern, how the lace came out, and the overall size of the satchel. Now in the pattern, it didn't state what length circular needle to use. You could work this out by using a swatch and the amount that you are supposed to cast on, comparing the two to work out roughly what size the cable should be. But for the sake of this video, I will show you how different sizes can affect the ease of your work. So here I started on a 26-inch cable, but later we'll drop it down to a 16-inch cable. As ever, I always have a set of needle grips ready to secure my interchangeable needles. This makes sure that they don't come undone as you work, and make sure that the rollable mechanism in our needles works to its fullest. You will also need one stitch marker, as you will be working this pattern in the round. For this I'm using our locking stitch markers. You can get them in a mix of green or pink, or in this lovely multicolour range. You will also need a pair of scissors, which I am using my favourite puppy snips. These also come in a kitty and octopus form, which you can see on our website, which I'll link below. You will also need, I forgot to include this, a tape measure and your favourite tool to weave in your ends, whether that's a darning needle or a crochet hook. So to start, I cast on 6 stitches. I used the long tail method. In the pattern, Rachel says to cast it on provisionally as you knit back into the live stitches later, but as you can see, I just cast on normally. So this is knitted from the strap first and states to knit garter stitch in the instructions, but in brackets it actually tells you how to do stocking stitch. So if you're ever unsure with patterns like this, just look at the photos, look at reviews, look at other people's attempts on Ravelry, and through doing this I found out it should have been garter stitch along the strap. However, once again for this video, I will do this in stocking stitch to show you what happens. The difference it creates is that a long strap of stocking stitch naturally curls, so you get more of a rope than you would a handle, whereas garter stitch would stay flatter and feel sturdier. It wouldn't dig into your shoulder as much. But once again, it's so you can see what difference it would do to your pattern. So the pattern states, knit this strap until it is 25 inches long, or until your desired length. I realistically did not need this strap to be 25 inches long. As you'll see later, the reduced needle size reduced the size of the actual bag, so the strap is a bit ridiculous with it, but once again, so you can see how it affects it. So next is the increase. I knitted my 6 stitches one last time and then cast on 34 stitches. At this point is when, if I had a provisional cast on, I would have undone the scrap yarn and knitted into those live stitches. However, since I didn't, I have to do this rough picking up stitches to join the piece together. It does the trick, but it won't be nearly as secure or as tidy as if I had done as the instructions suggested. After this, I cast on another 34 stitches, meaning I have 80 stitches in total on my needles. Like I mentioned earlier, for this I guessed the cable size to use rather than actually work it out. But since I went for a larger cable than what this project required, it is nearly impossible to knit in the round. The pieces won't touch, it is too stretched out, so I swapped it down to my 16-inch cable, which meant easier knitting. To transfer my stitches smoothly, I used a cable connector to connect the two different cables, shimmied the stitches across, and then reconnected my tips across. Now, the next stage is when you begin knitting in the round. Always make sure not to twist your work before you start, as you will have to unravel your work and start again. Before I started this, I placed my marker. If I hadn't, I wouldn't have known for sure where my pattern was to start or end, which would have led to some interesting details on the pattern. To create the brim of the bag, the instructions were to knit the first row, purl the second row, and repeat this 2 more times. The next step is to swap your work onto larger needles. The best practice is to transfer the stitches as you knit, but in the cause of making mistakes, I just swapped the tips on the same cable that my work was on. This is perfectly fine when reducing the size of your needles, however when increasing it, it makes it 10 times harder to knit the first round on them. Also, you risk warping your work or snapping your yarn, and as you can see, it was a bit of a struggle. Then I started the lace pattern. This is one of the simplest lace patterns you can try. It is yarn over, knit 2 together for 1 row, and then knit the next row. I repeated this 20 times as the instructions suggested, but you can do them until desired length. With the correct size needle, this would create that grocery bag look, but as I was on smaller needles, it created more of a large moss stitch look in a simple little purse style. It isn't nearly as big as the one the pattern explains, and it isn't as stretchy. Once I had repeated this pattern 20 times, I bound off on 3 needles. First thing is to turn your bag inside out, so that when you've worked it, the seam is invisible. Since I didn't do that, you will see the effect it had on the finished project. To do this bind off, you will need a 3rd needle, and for this I used the previous 4mm needle I was using. First, divide the stitches so that you have 40 on each side of your needles. This will make it easier to cast them off as you go. You want to then hold your work like so in your left hand and use the needle in your right to bind off. The right needle goes through the front needle in your left hand and then put it through the back of the stitch on the back needle in your left hand. Knit these together as if you would one. Do this again and then cast off the stitches on the needle in your right hand. Repeat this until you have cast off all of your work and tie off your end. Weave in all your ends as normal and any loose yarn. Now, if I had have turned the bag inside out before doing the cast off, it would be seamless. But as I hadn't, you can see this strip along the bottom. Now this satchel is a lot smaller than it really should be, with a really long strap. But I do kind of like the pattern it has created, even though it is nowhere near the size that it should be. Now this bag won't be used for its intended purposes, as it won't be able to get a lot of shopping in it. However, there is a lot of mistakes that I've made in the past in this bag. Mistakes that have helped me improve my knitting skills and that I have learnt from. There isn't a single knitter or crocheter who hasn't had so-called failed projects, but it's finding the silver lining in them. For example, my friend's kid has already seen this bag and loves it, so this may be getting posted to her for her to use as a play bag. Like I said before, I do love this pattern, and I am currently knitting up a correct version, which I will post on our Instagram once it is complete. But I know this version I have made incorrectly will still be used. I have actually still got scraps of different projects that went horribly wrong when I started knitting 6 years ago, that I can compare to my work now. So keep practicing, keep learning, and keep making. Buy the tools I have used in this video, follow the link in the description for your local stockist. If you want to become a HiyaHiyaEurope retailer, there is also a link to registration below. Please head over to our social sites to get updates on our products, retailers, and things that people have made using HiyaHiya tools. And until next time, happy knitting!